Welcome, everybody, to the August 18th, 2022 Planning Board Special Meeting here in Council Chambers in Sunset Beach. Seeing we have a quorum, we'll call the meeting to order. If we could stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. There's a statement that we read prior to each planning board meeting having to do with conflict of interests, and I'll read it aloud and get each member of the planning board to be affirmative or decline. Does any member of the planning board have a conflict of interest or the appearance of a conflict of interest with regard to any item on the agenda? And if so, please state so at this time. Ron?
Nope.
No for me?
No, I do not.
No.
Okay. We have an agenda before us, and it's a pretty straightforward agenda. It's got one UDO update topic on it. Does anybody have any suggestions that like to vote on for amending this draft agenda?
Nope.
If none, so
You need to add to cancel the September 1st
oh,
meeting.
okay, thank you. We will add an item after public comments that will, the second public comments, where we will be addressing the next regular session schedule for the planning board, which is set up for September 1st, which we will discuss canceling that meeting because we don't have anything on the agenda as of yet.
So I guess I'm happy to make a motion to add a new business item to next regular meeting schedule. Anyone like a second?
Second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous.
So it's amended.
And thank you, Ron, for that. It would be number 2. It would not be after public comments. Like to have a vote for accepting the agenda as amended. We have a motion for that, please.
Aye. Oh, yeah, accept a motion to accept the agenda as amended.
Okay. Second, please.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So approved. We will open up the floor to public comments, and not seeing anybody in attendance, we will check that off. Under new business, we have the UDO update, and I'd like to provide a status report briefly, particularly for those that may be viewing under YouTube, to kind of catch up as to what we've done and where we're going with this Unified Development Ordinance update. Status report. Per the January 13th, 2022 scope of work and schedule that was authored by the Cape Fear Council of Governments, Wes McLeod, who's present here today, we are on schedule, happily, having completed phase 1 of the audit of our present Unified Development Ordinance. I'm calling that phase to be the initial page-by-page process to identify articles and provisions that warrant change, removal, or update from the previously adopted December 3rd, 2012 Unified Development Ordinance version and its amendments. This phase 1 consisted of identification of problems, improvements, and inconsistencies in our present UDO and general code as viewed by the Planning Board, town staff, and the Council of Governments. Now that we've completed this initial audit pass, the Cape Fear Council of Governments provided us with a reorganized and reformatted Unified Development Ordinance, or at least the first portions of that, which is the scope of work for Phase 2, which begins now. As the foundation for Phase 2, the Cape Fear Council of Governments will guide the Planning Board and town staff in reaching consensus on key issues. Once Phase 2 is completed, and that is scheduled to start now in August of 2022 and end approximately in June of 2023, then an updated Unified Development Ordinance for the Town of Sunset Beach document will be reviewed for approval by the Planning Board and referred to Town Council for review and adoption. Final draft with the Planning Board revisions and joint review with Town Council and associated public hearings with our citizenry will then take another 4 to 5 months estimated. That process, which is anticipated final adoption of a revised UDO by the end of 2023, thus approximately a 2-year total update process from when we started. I personally found this transition from phase 1 into phase 2 to be a tedious but very worthwhile process, as I used my phase 1 meeting margin notes along with the Council of Government recommendations to align with the new format for our future UDO versions. And I guess I start with a question for Wes. Could you explain for our edification as well as for the audience why a reformat is necessary? Have you seen that with your experience with other communities to be beneficial?
Yes, sir. This will be beneficial for the planning board, certainly staff, your town and your town council, and then obviously your development community. As it stands now and has been discussed during the audit process, you have many areas in the UDO where things may be scattered in multiple different locations. In particular, your administrative procedures section, your approval procedures are littered throughout your current ordinance. And so that is the big piece, the reorganizational piece of this, frankly. You're still going to have a very similar use table and use standards or supplemental regulations and then performance standards. But the big piece of this is pulling all those different approval procedures and putting them into Article 2 so that, hey, staff knows they're all right here. You guys know they're all right here. We're not looking, go look at Article 3, and then there's another section in Article 2, and then there's another section in Article 4. That's the big reorganization piece of this. I know it seems as though we're throwing the baby out with the bathwater, but it's not necessarily so. And not only that, as part of that, the goal is to reduce some of the redundant language that you have in here. We don't want to have a document that is any less stringent or sufficient, but where we can reduce the text of this document, the better for everybody.
And I'd like each member of the planning board to kind of respond as they've gone through their initial regurgitation, if you will. I have just a couple general housekeeping notes to ask you. In our existing UDO, Unified Development Ordinance, any place within the document where there's a definition provided in, I believe it's Section A, it's bold. And you've not done that, and I assume that's on purpose.
Yes, sir.
I found that very helpful in the old document. Is it just too much work? Do you find it?
Certainly, it can be gone back through to do that, but remember, if there's a question about whether there's a definition, well, you can flip to it, and I think that oftentimes, while Mr. Chair, you may be one that's akin to looking up definitions, or Mr. LeBruno, I think it's typically a duty of staff, and I don't think staff necessarily needs a bold and italicized definition. You're the only community I have ever seen that has that, and I think it tends to litter the document.
Someone's got to be the tip of the spear.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, the reality is the definitions are in there whether they're bold and italicized or not. If that's something when we get back,
Well, it'd be easy to do at the end if you wanted to. It's just to find and replace, right?
yes,
So you find a word from the definition, replace it with the bold version of the
that's
word.
right.
and it's
But
done.
but you'll
Right.
find that over time certain definitions get lost and some aren't bold and italicized, and certainly if that's something that this board feels we need to do towards the end, we'll do it.
Another question that has to do with
Yeah.
definitions, and not necessarily the bolding of it. But we're all aware that there's definitions not only within our Unified Development Ordinance in a separate section, which I find very useful, but also our municipal code has its own, let's call it, series of definitions. And at the start of a lot of those municipal code sections, I guess we call it general code sections, they will give us a series of definitions. How binding are those definitions for interpretation on town staff?
Well, so they, in the general code, if there is a chapter in the general code and there's definitions for that chapter, they're applicable to that. But those definitions that are in that general code are not applicable to this.
Okay,
Definitions that are in this are applicable to this. And when we get to the flood damage prevention article and the wireless article, those will have separate definitions at the start of those articles because those are very specific items.
Okay.
And so, and then otherwise, all the definitions are at the end. Flood damage prevention, they follow their own set of rules per se. Same with wireless. We can put those definitions in the bulk of the text in the back. But what happens is that they can be construed to apply to other things in your ordinance that you do not want them to apply to.
That was my fear.
Yes.
Because it's a different context.
It is a different context. So those two articles will be different in their format because they'll have definitions that are aligned with those specifically. So I hope that answers that question.
It does.
Okay.
Does anybody else on the planning board, hopefully you do, have any just opening comments, even if there may be housekeeping, about as we go from phase 1 to phase 2, any questions you have, concerns you have, so we can launch this second phase?
I'm curious as to why wireless has this special nation status. Is that
Has it, pardon?
the wireless definitions and the wireless sections, it appears, had kind of a special nation status in that
They have different triggers for when certain permits apply and co-location and all these types of things that could be taken out of context, and someone could try to apply them to a zoning provision
Right.
that you do not want them to apply to.
got it.
That's why they'll be under their own.
Now, are these has this been run by the carriers? I mean, do we seek their input into these definitions and this?
No. Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
what you have is in accord with general statute requirements for cell ordinance provisions. There's certain things that you cannot do. Those have been incorporated in, and the wireless lobby is not as powerful as our home builder lobby, but they have managed to get through certain things that preempt local governments, and those are all in here.
I might submit that we deal with the wireless when we get to that article, because I think that then we'll all be in tune with the subject, as opposed to, because I have no idea what you're talking about,
Yeah.
and I don't think it matters to me
Yeah.
right.
But
right
I'll give
yet.
you just a kind of a highlight in that the vast majority of people will not have a landline.
That's
If power goes down,
yes.
if we don't have robust wireless connectivity, and I've talked to Ken and Paul about this, we're going to have a difficulty in terms of providing emergency services to a significant portion of the population, because they're going to be sitting in their homes. Wi-Fi doesn't work.
I think
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
obviously very important, but
Yeah.
can we stay on task,
Yeah.
please?
I-
Otherwise, we'll never
So
get
that's
through
kind
if
of the
we drift.
highlight of where I'm going to go with this when we get to it.
Okay,
Thanks.
that's important.
Yes. Okay.
Richard, any specific comments about as we transition now?
No.
Formatting
Yeah.
or Ron?
No.
Well, as you say, it's somewhat tedious. I mean, going through the audit, of course, followed our old format, right?
Yes.
And then trying to look at those notes and the minutes,
Mhm.
that makes it difficult, because we're seeing now the new format.
Mhm.
And there's no way to tie where things were moved. We're kind of relying on you to make sure. I guess I don't see any way to know that something was missed. Something that said later, maybe in section 13, we said move that to section 1. There's no way for me to go, because I'm never going to, well, maybe I will when I get this, to see that it got moved or something. We're solely, I'm just afraid of falling through the crack stuff. So I guess at this point, I don't see a good way for me to figure that out. To go through all the notes and say, what should have been moved to 1 and 2.
I mean, that's my job.
Okay.
That's why you hire me. Yeah.
And aren't we supposed to look at this and see that this is doing what we want
Yes.
to do?
That's correct.
That's the way I did it
Yeah,
at my second
yeah,
pass. But I'm just expressing the thing that raises the hairs on my back. I don't know what it's not there.
What
That
I've
should be
done,
there.
But
Ron
it's not
brings
there
up a,
because we chose to not put it
Well, I
there.
don't know that.
well, Ron
Really?
brings up an
Well, you were
excellent
here.
point. There's several things that we entrusted with Wes where we couldn't really, we knew that new wording needed to happen, and we said we'd like to see what Council of Governments might suggest. So we really don't know what that wording is until we find it in the new document. And that occurred, I'll bet, a dozen times.
Yep. And that's why we're now
Yes.
here to review that material.
Sybil, I didn't mean to cut you off. Well, Ron, you may not have been finished.
No, I was done.
Okay.
I mean, she's
Sybil?
right. We were here, but
And yeah, because what you're asking is a monumental task. We've gone through it bit by bit and said what we choose. So now let's see, is this right? Is this what we want?
Well, Ron's
Is
just saying, how do we know that something hasn't been missed?
Well, isn't that
we're
his
human
job?
beings. He's human.
That's his job, to see that it isn't missed. And if we try to second guess everybody all the time, we're never going to get through it.
well,
Point.
as we all realized, the last time this was done, things were missed, right?
That was a very
I know. That's it.
That was
So
a very narrow
I'm just trying to
zoning thing,
Well,
wasn't it?
I'm very familiar with what happened with that. There
I'd
were
like to
3
see-
articles that did not translate. We're not going down that
I know.
path. I can assure
I'm
you
sure
that.
you don't
Yeah.
want to, but
Yeah.
all I'm saying, I'm trying to develop what do you want to call it? A methodology for me to, when I get these sections, to make sure it is what I want. I mean, it is correct. And that at the end of this, I can say, we came up with the best product possible. And maybe as I do this more, as we get more sections, I'll get used to it better.
Mhm.
I mean, I made 2 passes through this. Once, looking at the audit,
Mhm.
which was by our sections, 1 and
Yeah.
2. And then I looked at the minutes to see what we said on those 2 sections.
Mhm.
And then I made my read
Sure.
and I looked at this. And then I put it away for a few days. And then I came back and I read it just straight without
Yeah.
to see did it make sense that way. But again, the only thing in my mind I was thinking is there things in other sections we discussed, not 1 and 2 of the old system, that should be here that I don't see because I don't know how to, but maybe that's just me. And I'm glad we got 4 other members that will get it. So
I
never
think
mind.
let's
Go ahead.
just see how we go with going through this. I mean, remember, this is basically we're getting 2 passes of this. Not only are we reviewing the entirety of the first document and pointing out those policy pieces that require change, but now you're also getting the fresh document in its draft form to also make sure aligns with what you guys want
It
to
serves
see
the
happen.
purposes we
Yeah.
want, just like Sybil was
Yeah.
saying. Sybil, do you have any other specific comments about this?
No.
Jerry?
Yeah, I do have one. I'm just been new to this process, this UDO process, and I've been totally impressed with Wes and the entire board, what they've done so far. So,
Thank you for your contributions too.
well,
In response to Ron,
I'm finished.
what I do is I go through the new format, and as I see a section, whatever it is, I then find it in my margin notes in the first pass we made through, and I put a check mark that yes, that's been addressed to my satisfaction.
Right.
Only my satisfaction.
Yep.
Then I go back in here and I write in the new version, I say was section 101,
Mhm.
1.01 CE. So I can always get a cross reference. Now, if there's something in my original margin notes that doesn't get checked off, it means that I couldn't find it in the new version,
Sure.
in the new format.
Yep.
And so then I'm going to ask you, where is it? Because it could be somewhere just reworded, but saying,
Or it may be
The
in
point we want.
in a future section.
but that has taken me hours and hours, because we can't expect the minutes from our meeting
Sure.
to be transcripts of the meeting.
Yep.
They're going to hit the high points, and that's what they're intended to be.
If perhaps what I'll try to do in our next section is where we're moving sections, I'll have a rubric that will show this was formerly section X and it is now in section whatever it may be.
Oh, that would be awesome.
But you got to remember is that as we go, we may pass over sections that aren't going to get moved in until later down the road. So you will, for example, in your old Article 2, you had all types of development standard provisions that had no business in there that aren't going to come till
Later.
way down later. So it doesn't matter if it was so I just point that out.
Okay, very good, very clear. I would submit, and I guess I have to go with town staff's recommendations here, and particularly Wes's with Council of Governments. I would suspect that what we will do now is we will start with the new format and work our way through that.
Yes.
And we will have comments or suggestions or something to say, because we'll be looking at the old UDO and our margin notes.
Sure. Yes. I mean, and yes, look at your margin notes, look at whatever, look at the new material. Remember that this doesn't make sense, whatever it is, it's fine. We would just start on Article 1.
Does anybody have any problems with that format, where we start with the new format that Wes has provided us, and it would be in the section dated June 16th, 2022, in the upper right-hand corner of each of these sheets, as we move through Article 1, General Provisions. And the first item is 1.1 title. I had nothing to comment on that. There's been stricken words and added words, and I think it makes sense. And if somebody has a suggestion, pipe up rather than us having to
Yes,
pause.
Yeah, we can.
Okay. The effective date, that's a housekeeping point that goes in. We don't know what that effective date is yet. Under authority, I hate to have lots of words that I think can be substituted with much fewer words. But in the third line, where it says to secure safety, and it talks about fire, panic, and other, I would suggest we say to secure public safety, and then go to the colon, or the semicolon.
This is in A or
A, where we add the word public after secure in the third line, and knock out from fire, panic, and other dangers. Now, again, that's nitpicking, but and I don't want to nitpick, but I am.
I don't see that. You see that?
Yeah.
I'm looking under 1.3 authority,
Mhm.
and I'm looking at the third line, not third sentence, where it says to secure safety. I would add the word public safety and then knock out all the four other categories that it lists there. You're not
Okay. To
seeing the
prevent
same thing.
overcrowding of land, to avoid undue concentration, to
No.
fill
No, I'm in the third line.
Yeah, I know.
It currently says to secure
Oh,
safety from fire, panic, and other dangers. And I think he suggested to
Yeah.
secure public safety, semicolon.
Okay, and then the other semicolons leave them.
Yes,
Yes.
yes. One other thing I'd like to have added, and it is, and I'm going to talk about the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the sixth line down, where it starts off with transportation, water, sewage, parks, and I'd like to say the preservation of open space, because I think that the preservation of open space is an important consideration in our Unified Development Ordinance. As you say, another You say
Well,
other.
this was your old language, and this comes based on the statutory authority from zoning in 701 and 703. But that can be added in here. Avoiding undue concentration of population is the zoning equivalent of open space.
Okay.
But we can, put parks and other open space and public requirements. What's that?
That would satisfy me.
Provision
think-
of
I think-
parks, open space, and other public requirements.
That's fine.
Okay.
And I'm saying that because we use our land development ordinance, our what are we going to call that now?
This is a UDO.
Well, but our
Comprehensive plan.
comprehensive plan. Strewn throughout that is open space.
Mhm.
And it's what all of our citizens wanted, is the preservation of open space. So I like to see that inserted in our UDO as well. to create
Just
that link.
open space or
No, preservation of open space.
so it says provision of it. It would be provision of open space.
Okay. All right.
Provision, because I don't think the language would be provision of preservation of open space. It'd just be you're providing open space.
Okay.
Provision of
there.
open
That-
Yes. Yeah.
That would satisfy
Okay.
me. When you go down to B under authority, the third line, it says, or the general welfare of the community. I think it's and the general welfare of the community. Now, again, that may just be wording that we have in our existing document. I'm not going to
The health,
exchange
safety.
general welfare. I'm not going to say or. You can
Okay.
opt out for health and safety. It's
And
the general welfare of the community.
okay.
Now, we have the word morals in here, and we've gone back and forth on how arbitrary that can be or how subjective that can be.
It can be taken out.
Would anybody on the planning board have any
Take it out.
issues with having
it out.
morals removed?
No.
It's so vague and argumentative.
Yeah.
All right, does anybody, I'm through with 1.3 authority. Does anybody have any comments in 1.3 for authority?
No.
I have no comments on, I agree with 1.4 jurisdiction and zoning map.
Yeah. As being an old-fashioned stickler for formality, this is really just a housekeeping change. The first time on the first line, when you go within the towns, don't you think on this opening section it should be more formal and be the town of Sunset Beach? To lay the formal. Every time we use the word town, it refers to the town of Sunset Beach.
Sure.
It's the first time I think it's used that way. When I'm kind of old-fashioned, the opening of any contract or anything should be formal, and then after that you can say parentheses town, and then every time you use the word town, it's the town of Sunset Beach.
Yep.
But
Got
the
it.
first correct, I think that's the first time.
Yep. That's fine. Yep. Got that change.
Right.
Now, do you
And
mind?
I think that's our formal name, right? Our corporate name is Town of
Yes.
Sunset Beach.
And Wes and town staff, our administrator, do you have any issues with? I think we've been nitpicking here, but I think it makes the document more significant. I think it makes it read better.
For 1.4a.
No, I mean everything we've talked about. We haven't.
Oh yeah,
we
no,
haven't
no,
said
that's
anything
fine.
that's
Yeah. Let's
substantive
keep
yet.
let's keep going. We're good.
Okay. Anybody have anything else with 1.4? I do not. Under 1.5, interpretation of zoning district boundaries. It talks about center lines and if there's roads and railroads and adjoining zoning districts. Is there a case where a utility easement would be on the border and commingle between two zoning districts?
It could be. Where you is there?
Well,
a
I'm on
particular reference? Yes. So long as I mean, this would be in rare cases, but if there was a zoning district boundary that was along that, I don't know if there are any at present in the town. There could be in the future. and we'd have to go and research the zoning map. But this is really just a matter of interpretation. There may be a
Okay.
description somewhere that says that.
All right, I'll cross that off. I've got nothing remaining in 1.5.
Okay.
Does anyone else on the board? I have nothing in 1.6 to comment on, relationship to existing development regulations. It all seemed to make sense to me. The same for 1.7, interpretation and conflicts. A lot of the wording is just right out of our existing UDO, which made sense.
Right. We're,
Was-
we're not recreating the wheel here where we don't
Okay.
have to.
Computation of time, same thing. Fees, the same thing, even though that was a section 2 item before, and I see how you've brought that into here, which makes sense to me, because it was 2.16 before.
Mhm.
And the same for 1.10, severability.
Severability.
That was in 2 before that was out of place.
Okay. Now, as a point of, I guess, organization, when the original schedule was established, or at least suggested by the COG letter dated January 13th, 2022, you were putting timelines on things. We have just got to the point where we've completed everything that was expected of us during the August 2022 meeting.
Yes.
I would suggest we've been here for 31 minutes, that we
we're-
continue.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Remember, that schedule. Hey,
Right.
if we're going by it, great. But we got a lot of moving parts here. So
Well, I will
yeah.
predict that we do not get through Article 2 as quickly as we did Article 1.
Yes,
you know?
indeed. So yes, there's
And Ron is agreeing with me.
No.
we're fine to be ahead of schedule.
Under 2.1 general, you're listing the five positions, if you will, that we're now going to discuss further
Mhm.
in Article 2,
Just a point
in
of
the order in
organization,
which they're
yes.
there. Would it be prudent, maybe not, but would it be prudent to have a category for the duties of the building inspector?
I don't think so. The building inspector is mentioned here in very limited places, but
But as working for the UDO administrator, we're getting their authority from the UDO administrator.
They get their authority really
State.
from the state building code and the building code that's in the general code. So
Okay.
there are matters. There's mentions of limited matters for the building inspector in here. For example, you'll get a page today that enforcement matters that are related to, for example, the state building code. They're under the auspices of the building inspector. But other than that, there's limited instances of where the building inspector would be applicable here.
I had noticed
There's building permit provisions.
that in our old UDO, we had a section, duties and powers of the building inspector. And
Yes.
now what we're saying is, we're not going to address that on the UDO level.
Which page is that?
It was section 3.22 in our existing UDO.
Mhm.
And it's an entire section.
Yep.
And then it goes the right of entry of the building inspector,
Right.
3.23.
That's all established in building code as well. Let's see, and state law as well.
All right. Well, and I don't expect you to show me the chapter and verse where it is or isn't.
Yeah.
I just want to make it clear that the building inspector has been taken out of the UDO.
Yep.
And not put in the new revision.
Yep. Yeah, this is all. Yeah.
But his powers of entry come from state law.
That's correct. I mean, 160D 1104, in addition to other statutes as well.
Anybody have any? Well, general was just really an outline for what Section 2, Article 2 was going to address. The 2.2 under Town Council. When we looked at the old, I'll call it the old UDO unless that's confusing to people, under Section 3.05, which dealt with the powers and duties of Town Council, Yeah, it was suggested, at least I believe it was suggested by Wes, that we address abstentions from voting. And I had that as a margin note in our original format under 3.05. But there's nothing in here, although I know there's a North Carolina UNC guidebook that I've used in various positions within the town.
It's in there on 160A dash 75A, if I recall. I'll look it up. That's that.
Where is it?
It's under 22A3. 160A-75 is the voting reg provision.
So that covers that. You're
Yes,
saying.
sir.
By including that in there, that covers that.
It does, and
instance.
you want to reference that statute because it could change in the future.
Okay, I'm just looking at your note that said include reference, and it talks about
That's the one.
regarding an abstention from voting.
Yep.
And and that is important because if somebody abstains, it can affect a majority vote. It can affect whether something passes or not.
Mhm.
It can affect whether it's automatically taken as an affirmative vote.
Yep. Yeah,
There's all kinds of things that can mine into that.
Yes. 160A-75A, no member shall be excused from voting except upon matters involving the consideration of members' own financial interests, etc. Basically, you can't abstain, blah, 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 if you otherwise could vote. And if you do, then it's an affirmative vote.
Ask another housekeeping question that we have to do with our planning board. Let's say that I abstain from a vote because I feel I have a conflict of interest.
Mhm.
Don't the other 4 members or whoever's present of the planning board have to either accept or reject my abstention? I can't just abstain because I think I want to abstain.
I think that would be up to the board chair. It should not be, I don't believe you have it established in your procedures, but you're talking about abstaining from voted versus recusing yourself is a different thing. The board can vote to recuse a member for a conflict of interest, which is a separate thing
Without the
entirely.
members' agreement.
That's correct. But the voting question, I think, would come down to the board chair making a decision on.
I thought the majority of the other board members would have to determine whether or not, because we're in a small town, just because my next door neighbor wants to have something done is not a good enough excuse for me because I have a requirement to vote.
Remember, we're talking about 2 different things here: a vote versus a conflict of interest. If a conflict of interest is something entirely different. If the vote is tied to a conflict of interest, then the board can vote on that, whether or not that member has a conflict. The board could not vote to say, well, Pete's vote doesn't matter or not. It would have to be up to, I think, the board chair on how that would be handled.
Okay, you've answered my question.
Okay.
So it doesn't need to be further addressed here, or did you just say we need to add that article more specifically in here?
It's in
It's
there.
there?
Yep.
With the NCG 160A 75?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. I had nothing in 2.3 planning board.
I have a question, I guess. In subsection 4, we've changed the word council may direct to support.
Yes, we had a.
But in item 7 and 8, we left it as direct. Did we do that on purpose? Or should they all be support?
No. This was a discussion about the planning board initiating things on their own behalf, and the language surrounding it, and what we arrived on was support.
As
And
long as
7 and 8 are
the town
separate
council
things.
would approve us to move in
Yeah.
that direction,
Yeah.
then we would take it on. But
Yeah.
we don't want to sit back and wait for town council to take the initiative to tell us to do something or to look at something.
So it doesn't apply the
Those are
same to 7
different.
and 8?
Those are different things. Remember, the 7 and 8 are 7 or 8. The council holds the cards, and 7 or 8 saying the council can direct you to do X, Y, Z. The other one is you guys initiating something on your own behalf. Those are two different things.
It made sense to me.
Okay.
Okay.
That's an important point to run because we
Yes.
certainly don't want to be just step and fetch-its for town council.
Mhm.
We want to be
Well,
proactive.
So if you change that to support on 7 and 8, if the council said we want you to look at X, Y, Z, and you guys said, well, we don't support that, that I don't
Okay.
believe that's
Yes.
how where we're going.
Right.
Okay.
All right. Everybody concur?
Mhm.
Under 2.3B Bravo, does anybody have any comments? I've got to read my margin notes here that are lengthy. Under 1, to me, it seemed to, when it talks about the ETJ, it really gives a definition of ETJ. Do we need to have a definition of ETJ? There's words in here that I think are just too many words. Where under 1, in the 4th line down to the right, it says who resides, and then it says outside the town, but within, I just say who resides within the ETJ of the town.
But
Sure.
the ETJ is a specific
But it has,
area.
but
It's
it has-
not just,
it has a definition on its own, though.
yeah.
It does, I don't think we need to keep on saying outside the town limits.
We can shorten that. But you do need to leave in there the appointment by the County Board of Commissioners, I believe.
Yeah, and I was.
Mhm.
I
Okay.
was. I was.
So
Yeah, what you're saying.
ETJ, and then
And
you
we have-
can cut all the way to and shall be appointed by the shall be appointed by the County Board of
Yeah,
Commissioners.
and that would stay. And shall be appointed would
Yep.
stay. Now, do we have to have the reference in there to NCG 160?
No, you can take that out technically. That was just calling out.
And I would say instead of just saying ETJ, because we haven't used that word in the document yet, that we write out extraterrestrial jurisdiction ETJ.
It is there.
Okay. I know it is, but
Okay.
I didn't want you
Okay.
to strike that.
Okay.
But I mean, okay, I
Please.
don't see the need to take it out because there are people who may not know. I mean, if I say I'm the planning board member for the ETJ, they go, what? And, you know, if anybody ever wanted to question the authority of a person, an ETJ member, that's why, because it comes from the state. I mean, and
Yeah, you're appointed by the county. Yes.
yes, but okay, but it's determined that you have to have an ETJ member. Well, who determined it and why? And that NCGS blah 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 160 that explains why you have to have an ETJ member. Because I'm sure a lot of people maybe in the town go, we shouldn't even live in the town.
Do you
Shouldn't pay
think-
town taxes, you know.
With her point, Wes, do you think we should keep the NC?
It's a
GS,
policy
keep
preference
that
for
in.
you guys. If
That's just my 2 cents worth.
I think
It's wrong.
in recognition of Sybil,
Mhm.
we need to, if she has a wish
Okay.
about that, I think it pertains to her.
so, we would just strike outside the town, but
Right.
leave the rest of it.
Right.
Yeah.
By definition of ETJ, it's outside the town limits.
Right. Yes. So,
So-
I'm just
Yeah.
Right.
I'm just trying
I
to
don't think it
clarify.
needs to be in there, but in deference to Sybil,
Okay.
I think she has the right to have it in there. It's-
Okay.
And leave the rest.
I was questioning when it talks about the population estimates for proportional representation. Does that mean that if our ETJ got so big that we may need to have 2 ETJ members? Or what are they talking about proportional?
That's what it says to me.
That's what the statute says. So
Well, if we're referencing the statute, do we need to
Put that in.
to have the statute rewritten right in our UDO,
what do you mean?
where it says that sentence, the population estimates for proportional?
when the 160D updates came and put in place, it was advised that that language be placed in everybody's UDO. But
Okay.
it's state law, so it's valid regardless of whether it's necessarily mentioned here.
I didn't understand what it meant. That's why
Okay.
I'm asking the question as to why does it need to be there? But
It's how you guys technically function in every other local government with an ETJ. But it's up to you all. They can be.
I mean,
it can be
I'm not going to fight over it. If the rest of you think it doesn't need to be there, that's fine. I just thought it
did
explained.
anybody else know what it meant?
It would just mean that if you have 5 citizens and one of them's an ETJ member, or one of them lives in the ETJ, one's in the ETJ and the other 4 are in the council. And so if you're proportional representation, if you have 100 ETJ residents and 400 council corporate limit residents, then again, same proportional representation.
I guess now the question of mine, do we even know those numbers?
Well, we could figure it out.
There was
Yes.
a 2020 census, right? Do we
Yes.
actually know the population of the town and the population of the
That is
and is it actually 4 to
that
1?
is a question not pertaining to what we're here. today.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I
Yeah.
guess
Yeah,
You guys do what you want.
the questions have added more questions, I guess, in my mind.
that's a separate question, if I may.
Well, then I guess I don't understand that sentence.
Well, I didn't understand it.
It says the population estimates for proportional representation shall be updated no less frequency than
Every 10
each-
years.
Okay, which we haven't done. So,
Yeah.
Again, a
And I think-
separate
Okay.
matter.
but
Yes.
okay, but does that mean the makeup of the planning board has to match that? Doesn't say that in the statute. What you're saying. In other words, right now we're 4 to 1.
hmm
Okay,
Yep.
and let's assume that that's
4
correct.
and 1.
Yep.
No, 4 to
4 and 1.
4 to 1.
Okay.
We have 4 times in town
Yeah.
than
Yeah.
ETJ. That's the ratio.
Yeah.
Right now it's 4 to 1.
Yeah.
And say in reality that's what it is. It's 4,000 in the
Mhm.
town and 1,000 in the ETJ.
Yep.
Now let's say for some reason ETA goes to
Then,
2,000.
then
Are we
you-
supposed to change the planning board?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh,
How do you know what it means?
yes, but then how can we say that there should be 5 members?
I am not hired to do that. So that's a separate function of the town.
I mean, because if that statement is true, then the makeup of
We
the
are
board
assuming
should be
that-
subject to that.
We are assuming that it is correct until we're advised otherwise. We're just moving along on the UDO. I'm not hired right now to do a population
That's not what I'm
calculation or
asking.
representation.
So that means, say that should occur in the 2030 census.
then you would.
Then we'd have to do a text amendment
That's correct.
to change this
Yes.
language to say now the board should be made up of
Yes.
whatever.
Which is fine because
Yeah.
we used to have an alternate. I mean,
Okay.
as time
Yeah.
goes on, things change within the system. And that would also be applicable, I'm sure, to the Board of Adjustment because they also have
Yes.
ETJ representatives.
That's correct.
So I guess only my question, the follow up of after the census period. I mean, should there be language describing the action? No. Okay.
Going on to B, number 2, there's words in here about how many meetings a planning board member can miss. And they talk about 2 consecutive monthly meetings for reasons other than illness. I would also like to add there, unless otherwise excused by UDO administrator or excused by somebody. I don't want us getting in the middle of,
Yeah.
did I have a doctor's note or not? And
For 2 consecutive unexcused monthly meetings. Is that
Unexcused absences or something.
Yeah.
yeah, but you have to. I would like to say who has the authority to excuse.
I think it'd be
The chairman.
planning,
Chair.
planning board chair. Yes, that's typically the case.
All right.
How about
Yeah.
for the chair?
Yeah.
How about for the chair?
Pardon?
The
The
chair.
vice chair would rule on that.
Okay.
So I got to be nice to you.
Yeah.
I know that's not going to happen.
Ooh.
From 2 consecutive unexcused absences.
Pete, I have one question on that. I thought we talked about the UDO would not count as a regular meeting.
It isn't.
It-
It
I thought
doesn't say
it's
regular
two-
meeting?
It's two monthly, two in the same month.
And these are unexcused absences.
2 consecutive monthly meetings. Meaning, we have our regular meeting is the first Thursday of each month. The other meetings are special.
I take unexcused to mean you're a no show, no call.
Okay.
We don't know, it's up to the,
It says in some of the other categories of work, I think it's for the town council, that it talks about 2 consecutive monthly meetings, and it also talks about more than half of the regular scheduled meetings in a calendar year. Is that something that we feel might need also to be added? Because I could miss every other meeting during the year and not be sanctioned by the way the wording is here.
Well, I'm assuming that the council can take
The
you off
town
the plan-
council always has the authority to
Yeah, take you off the
remove.
board anytime they want.
And nobody
they could
has the
step in at
authority
that
to
point.
take council off because they're elected.
that's
Right.
correct.
So that's why that wording is under council.
Mhm.
And
Thank you.
presumably they appoint you guys because you're going
Couldn't
to show
find
up.
anybody
Yes.
else.
Well, yeah. Or that. Okay. All right. So,
Wait, will you state for the record again for Katie what
Yeah.
y'all just did with that?
yeah, I was just going to try. Thank you. My understanding is that 3 is just going to be changed to the town council may remove and replace any member who is absent from 2 consecutive unexcused monthly meetings. Or it can say for 2 consecutive unexcused absences.
From a monthly meeting.
2
2 unexcused absence from a month,
from monthly meeting.
right? A
And you
regular
won't
monthly
mention
meeting.
illness.
You
or
might say
anything else.
regular monthly meeting, that's the terminology we normally use, right?
From regular monthly.
Katie, are you
meeting.
clear on that? God bless you for that fake sneeze.
Are you taking out the reasons other than illness?
Yes.
Illness will not be in there.
Yes, because they're just going to say unexcused absence from regular monthly meeting.
So basically, you're saying that means illness would be an excused meeting.
That's right. Or you,
Okay.
you need to
Whatever.
go
I'm
on
good
a
with
trip or whatever it is.
Well, it
Yeah,
could be a death
yeah,
in the family.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah.
So the member talks to the chairman, chairman says you're excused.
Yeah.
Is that clear, Katie, or do we need to? I know we're rambling.
It will. You can put in there that basically that it is. You're providing that it's based upon unexcused absences, and yeah, from monthly meetings, from regular monthly meetings.
All right, I had nothing else in B under membership under 2.3. We go to C. I had one comment, and this is talking about because we're talking about the planning board, I hate to get on to the Board of Adjustment without addressing something that we just did, or we did it in 2020 as a planning board. I'm going to read my note and see if it makes sense to the rest of the planning board and to the staff and COG. Under section 3.16A, the planning board in 2020 changed shall to may regarding public hearings before recommending changes or approvals of plans, etc., to town council. I don't see that here under anything that has to do with powers and duties of planning board. And it was 3.16, A is an alpha. And it was an article that we actually changed
Right.
by vote, and we didn't want to be burdened with having to have public hearings every time we change something,
Mhm.
because the town council was going to be having a public hearing on the same topic, and we didn't want to delay the progress of certain changes, particularly if it was to the advantage of citizens.
Right.
because it would just add another 60 days onto the process. But it was 3.16A. And we changed shall to may, what my note was.
Right.
And we didn't want to be restricted from having a public hearing if we thought that something was particularly sensitive and the planning board, in fact, wanted input from the citizenry. But we didn't want to be shalled into having that public hearing.
So if you go into page 2-32 and 2-32, that's where we're addressing where it is appropriate to address our notice requirements for hearings for UDO text and zoning map amendments.
All right, I'm on that page. Can you tell me where I am?
So in 215, 4A and B. And so for B, in any case where the planning board, in any case where the planning board will consider an amendment to the zoning code text, notice of the amendment to be considered may be published. That's in the having blah 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 notice of the amendment.
But that, even though it's being published, does that mean we're going to have a hearing? I mean, it's a notice that goes out to people,
right?
So they
it would insinuate that you're going to have a hearing.
Well, before we wrote
Have you found it?
public hearing,
Sure.
and here we don't. We're not. It wasn't because I highlighted that.
Sure.
And I said, what does that really mean? What is that notice? Is it notice of a public hearing?
Yes. So if you look at 215A4, Planning Board Public Hearing Requirement, advertised, mailed, and posted notice.
Again, yes, but no, there's one thing that a citizen is being notified that something is happening. But if you put them on notice, it's a notice of a public hearing. They can prepare to be present and participate in that information gathering.
The last sentence of the notices always say that public comments are encouraged or something to that effect.
Okay.
Yes. And I'll just say that.
Can we say notice of public hearing?
So remember in your powers and duties in 23A6, you've got to promote public interest in and understanding of its recommendations. To that end, it may publish and distribute copies of its recommendations and employ such other means of publicity and education as it may determine. And then you have the specifics there about your notice, but certainly you can add it in here. It's just the appropriate place in terms of organizational is.
And I'd agree to 2.15 as having 4 and 4A and B having an inserted in there. Now, I don't want to be a munchkin here. Does anybody else on the board feel there's a difference between telling people that they're going to get a notice of something and telling them that the notice is going to be the fact that there's going to be a public hearing?
It's required. So if you're noticing it, basically it's required. You're saying that it's required for public hearing. I mean, it can be made more clear if we need to, but it's the same language that you have in there.
I don't want to beat it to death. To me,
Well, I guess
thought
what
it
I think what
important-
we're concerned about is, are we going back? Are we still? The decision was made that the planning board can decide to conduct or not conduct a public hearing.
Yes,
Are we still there with this language?
yes, you are.
And the way we're writing this, is it also clear to the citizenry that that's true?
But this says the
I
applicant
think he's-
shall be mailed by first class too.
Now, for rezoning, you retain the authority for a rezoning. The decision was that you're always going to mail notice for a rezoning, but for a text amendment, it's going to be optional.
And that's statutory.
But it's optional for planning board on both those items. But the planning board has always taken the position, if it's a rezoning, you're mailing notice. You're doing a required notice.
So let me be clear for the record. and I'll go along with the way you've laid it out here, and
Sure.
I appreciate the fact that you moved that into another
Yep.
section, which seems to make sense. If we do something here where we're changing zoning like we did on MR3 before, we can opt not to have a public hearing, or we can opt to have a public hearing.
Yes.
And whoever makes that suggestion is not going to be overruled saying that we don't have the authority to do that.
Whoever, no, yes, it says may. It says may in there. You're being. I think that even without that language in there, you potentially have the authority already to call for a public hearing, regardless of whether that language is
Well,
in
no, I
there.
think we're trying to get to the reverse of what you just said, unless I heard you wrong. Right now, for text amendments,
It is optional.
it is optional. And
For
everybody
rezoning-
knows, but when you say rezoning, that means changing the zoning classification on a
Changing
parcel.
the zoning map, modifying the boundaries of.
Then it's required.
Then it's required. You are required to do that. The town is required to do that.
So in that case,
By
if we're
planning
changing
board or
them,
the town council?
Planning board and town
And-
council.
so there would be 2 public hearings
Yes, sir.
required by law.
Well, one is statutory. One is you guys that are making yourselves do.
But I see where, I mean, you kind of had a gray area there when we're changing the text in
It
a
is
zone.
optional at your discretion.
Right. That's still just considered an amendment.
Yes, sir.
Text and zoning map, because this is in one section.
But
But A is just, should that say initiation of text amendments? I mean,
those are initiation of.
well, because you got the major section, 215, UDO text and zoning. A zoning map amendment requires the public hearing.
Both of them do statutorily at the governing board level. A rezoning call requires mailed notice as well, rather than just a newspaper ad. Text amendment statutorily before the governing board requires a posted ad in the paper. That's how the public hearing notice is required. In the past, you all required yourselves to have a public hearing for a text amendment, and it created some issues.
Well, 30-day delay, because once we passed it, then we had to have a public meeting at the next regular meeting.
Yes.
And cost.
And what we did with MR3 was a text amendment to a zoning wording,
Yes.
because we changed it from
I see
7,500
that.
square
I hear
feet to
that.
10,000.
Right. I just want, yeah. Well, I hear that we're at the same place, okay?
You're at the same place as you were. I didn't change it.
But
Yeah.
Well, yes, you
is it
did.
explained
Well,
properly, I guess?
We're clear that it's may and not shall. And before we did it in 2020, it was shall.
Yes.
We were forced to do it.
Yes.
We were mandated to do it. Yeah. Okay. All right. That answers my question. And again, that's how I'm going back and forth here. I'm checking off a margin note and saying, where the hell is that addressed? So it's, heck is that
Because when it was in that section before, it was in the wrong place. It needed to be there
Yeah.
with that process, not in your powers and duties.
Okay. Anybody else? I'm up to Board of Adjustment, and I had nothing in the Board of Adjustment that I did.
I do on paragraph 5.
Of what? C?
I don't know.
Or,
Yeah, C5.
Okay, I had one in C. I had a statement in C1. Can I do
Okay.
that first? Anybody
Yeah,
else
'cause
have
one's
something
before
prior to
5.
C1? It says alternates may only participate or vote. This is the last line of C1 in 2.4. Alternates may only participate or vote in the event of a vacant seat. What does participate mean? Does it mean you not allowed to speak? Does it, or deliberate?
I mean,
I can't.
it is meaning that you are.
C1 last line.
Okay.
I guess it is. Your language now says alternates only vote when needed to fill a quorum. That to me insinuates that if you had an alternate that could fill the 5th seat, then they'd still have to sit in the crowd. which if you have a variance, remember you got to have 4 out of 5.
Yeah.
So you always want
Yes.
that 5th person to be there if you can. So why, if you've got a vacant seat, why are we not?
They don't have to sit in the crowd. They sit up at the dais, but they have to be.
But that's what I'm saying. If you have 4 members present,
Mhm.
you have an alternate sitting here. You already have quorum at 4. They still sit there. They don't participate. The way this is worded.
No, the way it's worded now.
The way it's worded now
But this would allow
is the
say there's-
alternate would participate and
the
vote.
alternate will be called up to fill the empty seat at the meeting. Is that what we should have?
Yes.
The vacant seat at
Yes.
the meeting.
And that
Yes.
means that alternate must, under Board of Adjustment, must therefore be present and participate in one fashion, so they're up to speed on what the topic is and what the deliberations have
I
been.
think you got
Ready.
I mean, the participate is just saying, hey, you're in the meeting, and that you can also vote.
Okay.
I think we're
Well, that's fine.
we're trying to
know
make
what
things more complicated.
no, I didn't know what
Okay,
participate meant.
Got it.
And that's why I was just asking. I wrote speak, deliberate. I had question marks there.
Right.
So
Basically,
The alternates are given the same package as the regular members.
And
And
they
then
show up just the
They
same.
show up just the same.
They're in the
And if
bullpen.
the 5 present members are there, then they're not needed.
that's right.
But if 4 is only there, then they would step into that position. But,
But
they
they-
are still given the same
but they
package.
can't participate unless they're called.
They
in-
cannot
into the queue.
participate unless there is an absence of one of the regular members.
Makes sense.
So how does well?
This
Let me just-
language.
So we have 2 alternates. Is that we have 5 members and 2 Is that what we have?
Mhm.
Then
Because you have to have an
Who-
alternate for a regular member and an alternate for the ETJ member.
so that's how they fill the slots. That's my next question is, say the 4 is there and the ETJ member is the one absent, the chair would call the ETJ alternate in?
If the ETJ member is absent, the ETJ alternate fills that position.
Now,
ETJ member alternate cannot fill a regular member's
Or vice
absence.
versa.
or vice versa?
Right.
Okay.
And just for the record and for the public, both of those positions have been vacant since 2017.
Yes. Yes. Exactly.
Well,
And all of that is outlined in the North Carolina Council of Governments.
We have a lot of Board of Adjustments that they don't even have alternates because exactly what Lisa
Who
just.
wants to be a damn alternate when you're never going to go up to bat?
So, but we
We used to have them.
Yeah.
We used to have them.
We did.
so the change we're making is
it's just
our
clarify.
previous or our current code just pulls
I
the alternate
wouldn't-
for a quorum. Well,
I-
now we're saying it fills the 5.
I would not want your
Right.
current language to be weaponized in the event
No,
that somebody said,
I like the
"Hey,
new
now
language.
wait a
Yeah.
minute."
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I saw the different languages.
yeah.
I like the new
Yeah.
language. I
Okay.
just didn't know what participate meant.
Got it.
Whether you had to have duct tape over your mouth or whether you just couldn't vote. Okay, you've answered my question. Now, you had one run on C5.
On C5, we litigated this in the first time through, so I apologize for regurgitating this, only because it's kind of been uncomfortable. In 5, we changed all 3 mays to shells in our earlier discussion
hmm
on relieving someone of the duties on the Board of Adjustment. And it seems to me that that's, in my mind, I'm not comfortable with changing the first 2 mays to shell, because it seems like to me someone missing, again, we get back to that unexcused absences, 3 meetings, they should be, even though we hate to bump somebody out, but it seems like that should be,
Well, I mean, we talked about this at
I know, we
and
did.
You guys decided that you should not make it a shall because you're tying your hands in the event that, well, what if you don't have anybody else? Period.
but in reality you don't. In my mind, being someone in a management position,
Mhm.
sometimes
This is not
sometimes-
management.
well,
This is a
sometimes-
totally
well,
different thing.
Sometimes having the may,
These are voluntary boards
I
that
know.
do not get paid.
Can you add the word unexcused absences?
Sure.
it just seems like, well, I don't know. It seems fairly important, this position. I realize it's voluntary, but maybe I don't understand this Board of Adjustment as well as I should, But people who come in for it, don't they prepare documents and witnesses and
They
It's a
do,
quasi-
but they,
attorneys,
but
yeah.
an
they,
attorney? So there's a
Well,
big
that's-
expense.
they
And if you-
meet very seldom. It's not like you guys that you're meeting regular. They only meet when they have an item.
Right. So whatever we call the applicant has spent time and money preparing,
Mhm.
and then you come to the meeting and
We-
there's a no-show.
We schedule the meeting when we know folks are going to be available. It's not we're meeting on the second Thursday. Be there, be square. It's, hey, can all of your butts be there?
How about adding unexcused?
But
Well,
it hasn't, except absence due to sickness, death, or other emergencies of like shall be recognized as excused
Excused, yeah.
absences and shall not affect the
I
minutes.
didn't read on.
yeah, but we're still in the shell for that then, which means I don't know. I just like to give to whoever, I guess the chairman, in this case, more teeth. If in the unlikely occurrence that somebody missed, I think 3 might be too high. 2 doesn't show up to a meeting they were supposed to, that they're canned, in my mind. But
I don't
that's fine.
think that's ever happened.
Right.
Mm.
Not when it's volunteers. It's a little bit harder, I think.
And because of the cost associated with the Board of Adjustment hearing, we know everybody can make it.
Yep.
Unless they get hit by a bus.
And a lot of
On the
times we have
way.
to bring our own town attorney in too.
Yes.
Our attorney, Board of Adjustment has their own attorney.
Ron,
The applicant will
it's
have
you
their
brought up
attorney.
Okay.
subject.
If everybody agrees, that's fine. It just seems like a little more teeth would be better, but apparently it's not needed.
Well,
All
and
right.
once again, the town council has the authority
Yes.
solely to remove for any reason that they see fit.
With or without cause.
Right.
Okay, moving on to 2.5 Technical Review Committee. Sure. We go through other subsequent sections here, and we talk about the technical review procedure being accessible, if you will, or being applicable for the UDO administrator to bring into certain things. We just dealt with it in the wording for temporary events.
Mhm.
I'd like to see that added into here, unless you feel it's not needed. Under 2.5 A1, add on and for review of certain temporary uses and or events per UDO administrator requests. Now, it may not be necessary because it shows its face in subsequent sections, or it will show its face in subsequent sections.
That overarching department's responsible for development review, that basically can be almost anything. Temporary
Okay.
events, whatever. That's
I just-
very broad.
I just want our UDO administrator to have the ability to bring in the technical review process when they feel it's appropriate.
They do.
Mhm.
They do. This is very broad.
Okay. Does anybody else? Maybe I'm not being clear as to what my request is. I don't want it to be precluded saying, no, you can't bring the TRC in this.
Could it be just in the first line where it says for development and review, it should say development and permitting review?
That's one and the same in my mind. This
'Cause that's
is
your where they were issuing the temporary use
communication and
permit.
coordination between departments responsible for development review. I mean, you can add event, and you can make it more broad. Development review and any other matter by which departmental staff may be impacted. I mean, I
You were
don't.
referring to like I'd say if we just say and permitting,
Well, under the
development and permitting. Some people may view it development and permitting as kind of two separate functions.
Yes.
You don't. I can see on your face.
Well, because the UDO administrator wouldn't either, and it'd be up to them to determine.
Right.
and for edification of audience, our UDO administrator is Chad,
That's correct.
our planning director. All right, I just didn't want it precluded to be able to have that as a resource for our UDO administrator because it wasn't facilitating communications and coordination, da 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 da. But that's fine. You think it does, so.
Absolutely.
Yep.
All right, under number 3, 2.5.3, under technical review committee and procedure, I was pleased to see and/or planning board chair liaison added to the technical review process. Under UDO administrator, I had no comments. Does anybody have a comment under 2.6 UDO administrator?
It's just one member. Right. If it was
That's where you
three,
got in that trouble.
if it was 3 of them, then yes.
Sorry.
Are you talking about open meeting laws for
Yes.
the technical review process?
Yes. And I just said that if there's a quorum present, then yeah. So you guys will just have to be
Well,
careful
but
about
we'd
that.
always be cognizant of
yeah,
that.
yep.
Yes. Okay. That would be unmentioned.
Yeah.
All right. If we're coming on to 2.7, conflict of interest.
That's all statutory.
Well, we've had some, I think it bears note, that we've had in the past with some of our councils and boards, public comment that was talking about people needing to bring up that they have a conflict of interest. And our town attorney has been very clear that conflicts of interest are to be evaluated not only on its content, but on the size of our town, the fact that you are going to know your barber, and the fact that you are going to have relationships with more people than you might if you were
Somewhere else.
yes.
Yes.
So I just made the note here that there's an obligation to vote that needs to be considered along with all other evaluations of recusal and abstaining and conflict of interest. And I think the UNC School of Government Handbook is very clear on that. Is that an official document, or is that just something that's given to board members when they join a board?
I'm not sure exactly what you're referring to. It's not statutory, but it closely aligns with statutes. These are your statutory conflict of interest as they relate to development approval in North Carolina in 2.7.
Okay. Moving along, does anybody have anything else under conflict of interest?
And Mr. Chair, if I may, before we jump into this next section, there is a fair amount of new text here moving forward into our review procedures because we needed a lot of work on clarifying things because they were scattered about and so just I just want to mention that before we get in.
We noticed,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah,
We
okay.
noticed.
Okay.
Okay, going on to, we have a section 2.8 through 2.11 have been reserved. And I'll ask a question that Ron and I had talked about anecdotally earlier. When we have these sections that are reserved, did you do that because 2.12, the next section that we're in fact looking at, common review procedures, follows some sort of template that you've used with other towns or that just makes sense in the processes? Because all of a sudden, 4 sections are now reserved. You're just putting them in as placeholders in case something needs to be inserted later on?
That's right. So say you did go back and you decided you wanted to put building inspector in there, then you could insert it in 2.7 or 2.8 without moving around all of your references to the other
Everything
section.
in the future. I see.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Yes. All right. I've got a question, but it's not under 2.12 common review procedures, but it's not until we get to B, zoning permit. Does anybody have anything in A? complete applications. That wording all made sense to me. Because I'm sure that happens all the time where applications are not complete, and it gives a procedure to move forward. And it also stops the clock from ticking, which is very important. All right, zoning permit B and building permit C. I'm going to ask a question.
Mhm.
Tell me the difference between a zoning permit and a building permit.
Okay. Zoning permit tells you, say, let's imagine that where we're sitting right here is a vacant tract of land. Zoning permit, say, Pete, you're the applicant. I've given you the zoning permit. You are authorized to build a town hall facility on this parcel. You've been given the entitlement to use that land for a town hall. Pete may say, well, you know what? I don't really want to build this myself, so I'm going to sell the property to someone else. They've got an entitlement to come in here, or you keep it yourself. Whoever does that, though, they're going to need to hire an architect, engineer, etc. once they've secured that entitlement to submit plans to carry in the building department that comply with all the necessary state building codes, that then gives them the permission to come forward and start constructing the building on the site that's been entitled for a town hall. Does that
Okay.
make sense?
It does.
That's a second step.
So a zoning permit,
Permission to use the land.
okay, so it's a use.
Yes.
It's a use. In
Because
other words,
we're
it's
regulating
saying that it
uses.
can be for residential or commercial. It falls under a zoning stipulation.
Yes.
Okay. But a building permit is something that I need before I do something. It doesn't
Correct.
matter where I'm doing it.
Yep.
Whether it's an accessory structure or whether it's my home or whether
Mhm.
it's building a town hall.
Yep.
I need a building permit.
But there may be instances where you don't need a building permit.
Well, true.
So
Yeah.
you've got an existing shopping center
Mhm.
and you have a new tenant that wants to come in. They need zoning approval to make sure that it's one of the uses that's permitted in the
But they don't
district.
need a building
But
permit.
they don't need a building permit unless they're doing
And I
renovations.
knew that,
Okay.
but to me, I think it's confusing to the general public.
Sure.
And I've had conversations with people about use versus permission.
Yep.
And the building permit is there so that you follow appropriate construction and building codes.
Yep.
The zoning permit is so that you're using the property for the classification in which it was intended.
That's right. Building permit should not be issued without a zoning permit or zoning compliance.
All right. Does anybody have anything in under 2.12 common review procedures? We talked about complete application, zoning permits, building permits. We get into a subject, I read this and my hair went up in the back of my neck, tree removal and clearing permit, but it doesn't say anything. It just says
It references.
to be discussed later.
Yep.
All right, moving along. Anybody have anything we could talk another? We talked ad valorem for sign permits. All right. I'm turning pages without having any comments, even though I realize that a lot of this wording is brand new, and it's underlined. I have nothing until we get up to 2.13, specific review procedures. And then we get
And we
into,
could be safe to assume, even though Chad's not here, he's reviewed all this and not made comments to you? Or is there
Yeah.
any, does anybody know if Chad comments?
He would tell me. I've discussed these with him though. I mean, because these procedures affect him.
Effective, I'm just
So
wondering, Tim, has he sent you,
he and
has he
I
had any comments?
he and I have worked to make sure that this helps align with what he wants to see happen.
so you've had subsequent meetings with him after our various planning board special meetings.
Typically it's just phone calls.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, specific review procedures. And this is big, where we really redefine minor site plans and major site plans. And frankly, I'm not comfortable with it, but I'm not opposed to it. And I appreciate the fact that it opens up the process, speeds up the process, where things don't have to come before the planning board as often, whereas so that it lets town staff do their job. Does anybody have any comments?
No, well, I said I think we agreed and are good with the split between a major and a minor site plan, with minor being basically staff handled.
Mhm.
And we've agreed that the breaking point was 4 dwellings.
Mhm.
I have a question is, and maybe I'm jumping ahead, but in major site plan B2A, why is that 210 in there? Shouldn't that say 5 or more?
B2A, and you're looking at what?
B.
B2A, residential developments of 5 to
10.
10.
So
Oh,
we,
Shouldn't it just be 5 or
that's
more?
a great question, Ron. So we had the discussion that we were gonna have another category that we would allow multifamily between 5 and 10 to come to you guys for a major site plan, and then anything over 10 is gonna be special use permit. Right now, if someone walks in the door today and they want to build 3 or more units attached, it's a special use permit. And the discussion was, hey, that's kind of that's maybe a little bit difficult.
Okay, so that's where that came
But
from?
this is subject to change.
Okay.
Yeah, subject to you
Right.
guys' discretion.
Okay. Is it true? We'll go to where Ron is right now under 2.13, B Bravo, major site plan,
Mhm.
2C as in Charlie. Talks about all other developments not subject to minor site plans or special use permits approval.
Yes, that's what he's saying, because it's between
a
5 and
catch-all.
10. If it's over 10, it needs a special use permit.
Okay. All other developments not subject to the following development types must submit a major site plan as specified in this ordinance. Okay. Okay. Because I wrote a note here. I said, you mean special use permit projects don't need a major site plan? And if you read the whole thing in context, yes, they do.
Right. They do.
Because they've gone, it's over 10 dwellings, units. So it needs a special use permit, which needs a major site plan.
And the special use permit site plan review procedures start on C.
Right. All right, I had nothing. One of the things that, and I'm looking at major site plan, I'm looking at just this is really for the rest of the board here. I'm looking under 213, B, major site plan. 7, F is in Frank. And it says major site plan approval expires 24 months from the date of approval.
Yeah, we discussed that.
And because what I don't want to see is somebody getting approval on something and then just sitting on it. And because I think that's important, that maybe I'm using the wrong term, but that vested rights don't just continue on and on and on and on. And that's why we've put this 24 months in here. You feel that that's an appropriate duration?
Yeah, and it aligns really with our statutory vesting procedures. Pete, say I got approval to build this town hall or to use this site for town hall. How long is it going to take me to get my engineer to prepare stormwater plans for state permitting, get the contractor to build it? I mean, 2 years is.
But there are provisions for the UDO administrator to establish additional 6-month periods, aren't there?
Well, there's also common law procedures. So if you have expended if you've had expended a certain amount of funds in good faith on a valid approval, and you're out here and you put your you put all the plumbing in, the foundation, etc., and your major site plan technically expires, and the town says, "Well, you're done." I think that
Yeah,
would
we
not
need
be-
that.
Yeah.
Citizens need that. Developers need that
Yep.
protection.
So
Because, and we're going to come up to it later on, but there's other wording that talks about, and I'll bring it up again later. It talks about a duration that work must be done.
yes,
I'd like to see when we get to those phases, those sections where work is better defined, because work can be very subjective. What was the work? I had a groundbreaking with a gold shovel.
we just have to be careful because those are all pulled right from the statute, and to some degree are purposely that way.
Okay.
But yes, your point is well noted.
All right, does anybody have anything under C for this? Again, we're at 2.1.
I just had one minor thing.
2.13.
Time fence there. I think we should have a time fence on how long, even though in probably reality they know about it right away.
Well,
they have 30
you
days.
guys are going to be the ones that deny it.
Right.
Because
And then it says if the plan approval is denied, the reasons for this action shall be communicated to the applicant in writing. So don't you think we should have a time fence there on how long they get that written notice?
Doesn't 160D 604 establish what the planning board review and comments? It talks about zoning amendments, review.
I mean, we can say in writing within 14 days following official decision.
Well, that's what I was going to do for it, but I don't know, is there statutory, is that already covered somewhere else? It just seems like the written documents got to go out within a certain period of time.
We can say within 14 days of official decision.
Because if the applicant wants to move that up to the next level, whatever that may be, they need that written version to do anything.
That's correct. Okay.
I would also think too, I mean, I'm just making a comment, that's all, that if they want the permit, they're going to be here at the meeting and they're going to know why we deny it.
Right. And I will say that I don't believe that I've been privy to a single site plan denial in any of our jurisdictions because an applicant won't get to that point.
Yeah.
That it's they're going to modify their plan or pull it. Is the reality. I'm not saying that won't happen in the future, but
Yeah.
that's what occurs.
Okay.
All right, we're making good progress under 213. We're moving on to C, special use permit.
Well, and the definitions just reflect what we talked about, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
You
So
should
then-
have those new definitions that were given to you.
It says under C4, special use permits may be issued by the UDO administrator after approval by the Board of Adjustment. If the Board of Adjustment authorizes a special use permit, I don't think the UDO administrator has a may. It will shall.
Yes. Yeah, it can be shall. Yeah. It was just granting that they're the party. They're responsible after that special use permit has been
Once a special
approved.
use permit's been authorized by the Board of Adjustment,
It's reduced to writing, and the UDO administrator provides it to
what
the
if
applicant.
something comes up? Other evidence? Is it like a civil trial where so sad, too bad?
If the hearing, if the decision has been made at that hearing,
been
it's
made.
final.
Even if the technical review committee decides that, oh my God, we can't do that.
Well, then the town can appeal the decision of the Board of Adjustment. to Superior Court.
Superior Court.
Yes,
Ouch.
it's seen it happen.
Ooh, okay. So you don't mind changing may to shall there?
Sure, that's fine.
Okay. I mean, I wouldn't like to see an arbitrary action by the UDO administrator after.
They wouldn't, but we can.
Okay.
I try to be careful where we use the term shall, so we don't get ourselves into trouble.
The
Under,
rest of it is shall. The rest
Yep.
of that statement is shall.
that's why I circled the bay.
Yeah.
Okay, under C, special use permit 7, it talks about notifying owners of parcels of land abutting the parcel of land that is subject to the hearing. The Board of Adjustment, when it deals with certain categories of variances, requires that anybody within 150 feet of that property, if you will, would be notified so that they would have an opportunity to provide input.
Is that? I think variance. We've got the same notice process.
I'm talking about in our existing UDO.
Did we? I think that's something that we discussed. Statutorily, it's just mailed, and we talked about this.
I'm talking about who gets it mailed to. And this says you have to be abutting,
Yes.
which means directly across the street,
Yep.
or either side, or a common lot line behind.
And that there's a reason for that.
Okay.
The reason being that it is a quasi-judicial procedure, not a public hearing. Because if we notice you, Pete, and you're on the other side of town, you may come up and think that you've got a right to participate in this hearing when
No,
you
because
really
I don't have standing.
You don't have standing. That's correct. And so that's why, in my mind, you should not be noticing the whole town about these things.
Well, but the wording previously said for UDO variances, it was 150 foot abutting the lot be notified.
Well, that got changed, and I apologize if I didn't point that out, but that's bad practice in my mind, very bad practice, because again, same thing.
It opens it up to people that really shouldn't have standing.
That's correct. That's
Okay.
right.
All right, I'm crossing that off.
In the same section, and I apologize to any former or present postal workers, and it occurs all over this thing. Deposit in the mail at least 10 days. I don't think that's enough time today.
Well, that's statute.
I'm talking about why shouldn't that be 14 days, not less than that, more than that, because I don't know. My experience with first class mail today, it could be anywhere from a day to 3 weeks.
Yeah, I advise our folks to follow the statutory
The
minimums.
statutory says 10 days.
Yes.
Deposit in mail, postmarked. What does that mean?
10 and 25.
It's dropped in a mailbox.
Yes.
The problem with having it, and I kind of agree with Ron, but the problem, the more time we provide, the more difficult it becomes to schedule a hearing.
Yep.
For the Board of Adjustment. And if we have to have so much notice, it'll be, we got to wait until next month.
And remember, a sign is posted out there too. So if you're a neighbor, and honestly, that's where we get most of the calls, not the mail. Somebody sees that sign out there,
Like we have one by the gazebo at
And
the
they-
beach that was just put up there by the walkway.
and they
At the
call
town
and say, "What is going on with this?" And so that's and that's also posted out there.
Are
at that
you
time.
you hung on the 14 days?
Well, I mean,
I'll support you, but
because sometimes you have these things. There's the property. I'm more concerned about the abutting property owners. Maybe a vacant lot, and they don't even live here, so they ain't gonna see the sign. But if they get something in the mail, and if you mail it, whatever it means, dropped in the mail, does that mean taking it to the post office and hand it to them, or
It's
put it in the box with the little flag up?
It's
If,
right.
if they don't get it to the day of the meeting, how are they supposed to plan for this? I think we don't have everybody that lives here. I mean, this is not a big city where everybody's probably living in these properties. it seems to me the onus should be on
The,
the Board of Adjustment or whoever to make sure that the other affected people who have standing
sure.
get notified in reasonable time.
Yeah, but what about the property owner?
What about the property owner?
They have certain rights to use their property for certain things.
I'm not saying they may win their Board of Adjustment. That's their chance to win
I
it.
know, but
But the abutting people should have a chance
it's
to
trying
come.
to be a healthy balance.
To me, it's
if
just-
you're a property owner, you want to do something on your property.
Yeah.
Would you want the town to notice the entire world?
No, I'm not saying notice
Well,
everybody.
I'm just trying
I'm
to.
saying the people that are going to get a notice,
Mhm.
that they make sure they get it in reasonable time before the
If-
hearing occurs.
I-
And I'm a little bit skeptical in today's day and age
What?
because we're using
Sure.
United States Postal Service.
Yep. No,
that 10 days is sufficient,
I
and
understand.
it should be a bit longer. Whether it's 12 days or 14 days, I could be probably ahead at something more. I know town would like to obviously have less time, just get everything settled and send it out.
I
But
think-
I'm from the receiver's
Yeah.
point of view. If you own a abutting property
Sure.
and you're not a resident to see the sign,
Yep.
which
So
it seems fair to give that person with standing some notice. That's all I'm saying.
Our Board of Adjustment packets and agendas on the website and all of that. What level of availability is that to folks in advance of the meeting?
As soon as the board gets the packet, it's
Soon as
put on the website
okay.
and it's noticed.
And it's noticed, yeah. Is you got? I mean, I'll have to defer to staff on this, but I would highly advise against changing this to an arbitrary notice outside of the general statute.
If we do change it, there's probably other notices within the whole UDO that we'd have to make sure we're consistent on.
Yeah, it's all over the place.
I think 10 is reasonable, and there's going to be exceptions where it's not going to get there. I got a Christmas card the other day, so
It happens.
I'm sorry.
okay.
I very much understand, but
And it's really up to the property owner to be mindful of what is going on around your property. So if you own vacant property here, it's on you to be mindful of what is going on around your property.
Well, we did that. We owned a vacant lot here for 5 years before we moved here, and about every 3 or 4 months, I would call up the guy next door and I'd say, "What's going on?"
Right.
You know.
Yeah.
okay.
Ron, you brought up the point. It's
I
up
mean-
to you to either
I mean-
step away or.
No, if the sense of the other four is not needed, I mean, just listening to that is,
Is
it seems backwards to me. But
It's
the onus
If
is
you're
on the
gonna, like,
person.
change it, I'm going to need to get Grady's opinion because that is statutory.
If that's statutory and we can't change it, that's fine. But
Well,
Uh,
I guess we
it just seems like notifying somebody, the onus is on.
Let's keep that in the back of our heads because we're going to come up with that 10 days notice in several.
But if
of our
that's the law,
articles.
that's the law. We can't change it, then we can't change it. But
Yeah.
it
and
just
it's the
seems.
law in all the other places as
Right.
well.
All right. I had nothing under variance. I had the same question about the 150 feet, and you've convinced me otherwise, even though that was in 4.04 F2 before.
Can we go? I have one question in D, back one. But I don't know, in subparagraph
Under-
C, special use permit.
Oops, okay. D.
In D,
I'm there.
and again, this could be just law, but we make no mention of negative economic impact in these denial reasons. So that's the law? is what
under
it-
D 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah.
These are the standards that have been fleshed out through case law.
'Cause it seems like that's always the number one issue of the neighborhood or the abutting property owners, that something is making a negative economic impact to my property. But you're saying that's not allowed.
Isn't that the difference, though, between special use permit and variance? Because variance is more attuned to that type of reasoning, where a special use permit,
I mean, because they'll approve it.
So that the use will not adversely affect the use or any physical attribute of adjoining or abutting property. In other words, you can propose that it has a negative impact on the property value as a result of D3.
D3.
the III.
I. Use will not adversely affect the use. Well, I guess I read that different. Doesn't affect the use. You can still use the property as you intended. With that other whatever was built next to you on the abutting property, but that doesn't mean it hasn't economically affected the value of that property. For instance, some sort of approval of we'll go to the apartment building, I guess. We have a special use permit to build a 72-unit apartment building on the property next to your property, and it gets so.
I'd say that adversely affects the use of my property, not only the value of it, as well as an adverse effect. I mean, I can go back and we can talk to Grady about expanding this beyond the established case law, but
It just seems that
yeah,
my experience is that's usually one of the
it can be one of the
might be an
reasons.
excuse.
It can be one of the reasons that
The reasons that somebody says, well, you're putting
it needs to be attested to by a
Right.
certified appraiser report.
that's fine,
And
but
in the absence of the applicant also can't have the same report, or the Board of Adjustment has to sort out what's what. But that's evidence that can be used to prove that you have standing to testify against someone's proposal, that your property, that you're going to suffer, quote, special damages. Because I'm going to suffer those special damages, which are established by law, my property values are going to be impacted. I do not want this to occur here. But that's all in quasi-judicial procedure, which is in 160D-406. And that's all about standing. This is more so about the granting or denial of a special use permit.
so I don't know what everybody else feels. It's fine, I guess, the way it is. But I guess it's worthwhile to check to see that's properly covered or can be. Or
I mean,
legally.
it's always, you can always, as I said, regardless of what these four are in here, determination of standing can be based on the fact that you're going to suffer special damages as a result of a property value diminution. But it has to be attested to by a certified appraiser's report. Then that gives me the right to tell the Board of Adjustment that I do not want this to occur next
Right.
to me.
And it seems like that's because it's quantitative in nature, a more, I don't want to use the word easy.
So special damages have to be as a result of evidence, and they need to be based on, the evidence has to be competent. And so it can be because you're going to suffer parking impacts, you're going to suffer stormwater impacts, you're going to suffer transportation impacts. Those aren't in here. But that's what qualifies me to have standing to oppose a particular project, regardless of what the approval procedures are.
So you can petition for standing based upon a set of facts.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, I can't come in this we're getting into Board of Adjustment
But you don't.
training here.
But the Board of Adjustment would then
Yeah.
establish whether you have standing or not.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Just because you purport to have standing.
Proximity alone is not enough to prove that you have standing.
Because I was going to have a question under repeal when it talks about standing.
Mm-hmm.
Who determines standing?
The
And it's
Board
the
of
board.
Adjustment only.
The board.
The staff cannot determine standing.
Okay.
So all this has also been reviewed by the Board of Adjustment, and they're all good with this language, right?
That it has not.
I don't
but,
think so.
Are we
Uh,
going to? Because you just made a good point. I'm asking questions that
Sure.
maybe
Yeah.
I should have known if I was trained to be
I-
on the Board of Adjustment.
I have-
So they seem stupid maybe, but
I have done training with the Board of Adjustment, and
Right.
we have talked about the fact that the special use permit procedures, the 7 or 9 items that are currently there, are out of date, and that they need to be aligned with the current case
And these
law.
are the new ones, which would be separate ones for a variance and separate ones for a special use permit,
Yes,
or separate ones. from a
appeal,
special-
variance, and special use permit, and
Yeah.
yes.
Okay, and they're all outlined in here. All right, Ron, are you satisfied?
oh, sure.
As we move
Sorry,
move
I
along?
know. I know. Ron's not happy with me today.
Oh, we always love you, Wes. I'm the born skeptic.
Well, I mean, look, this stuff is technical in nature, and it's just,
One thing that it does say under 9, well, let me hone in on it, sir. Under D for variance, 9, it says no change in permitted use may be authorized by variance. And that makes sense to me, because if you want to change the permitted use, you have to get a special use permit,
or
not a
text amendment.
variance.
Text amendment. That would be a text amendment. I mean, so imagine that. I mean, we've had a case like this in Oak Island, that there's temporary storage containers illegally in the CB district. They try to apply for variance. That's a text amendment to allow temporary storage containers. A variance is a slight modification of the law of your ordinance, typically in a dimensional fashion, that you may need a setback relaxation or something like that. State law says specifically that you cannot
Okay.
do a change in use.
I had a question under appeal, E, appeal 2, but you've answered it. You've already given me a definition of standing, so I'm crossing that margin note out. The next section we come to is 2.14, creation of new lots, division of land. And I'll note that we're making extremely good progress. We're 2/3 of the way through our September scheduled meeting. I had nothing until we got to 2.14, creation of new lots, E, major subdivision, preliminary plat. Does anybody else have something prior to that? As we go into
I just have a,
minor subdivisions, but I'm blowing over.
oh no, Ron. Well, between minor and major, I guess. Okay, we're fine. Subdivisions of 19 or fewer lots
Yes.
is a minor.
Yes.
So 20 or more is a major.
Right.
But it's irregardless of the number of dwellings, right? Proposed dwellings. It's just the lots.
Right. Because those are different things.
Mhm. So that goes back then.
Subdivision is a different thing also
Right.
from zoning or building
Yes.
permit.
Yes.
Okay.
Under major subdivision E, preliminary plat, where Ron just brought up about the subdivisions now being increased or now being redefined as 20 lots or more. And really what that means for people watching is that the planning board now gets involved in something like that, where if it's 19 or less, the planning board doesn't. It's the UDO administrator. But I made a margin note here under major subdivision, preliminary plat. Can a developer, and I don't want to name a development because it really doesn't matter,
Mhm.
but we have many developments within this town now, subdivisions,
Mhm.
that are more than 20 lots, 200 lots.
Yep.
Can a developer have the ability to buy a large piece of land, either in the ETJ or in the municipality, and carve it up into 19 lot sections and call them something different?
Yep.
but they all flow together.
I would say that they're deliberately subverting the terms of the ordinance, and there's established case law to say that they can't do that. Remember, there's two parts of a subdivision: a preliminary plat and then the final plat. The preliminary, they're going to. It doesn't make economic sense for them to do that because they need to get their stormwater and everything else for that entire subdivision, right? And then they may phase it out at the final plat level at 19 lots here or whatever.
Which they do all the time.
Which they do all the time, but the initial one, all the roadway infrastructure, everything else, they got to get their stormwater permit for the entire thing.
So if we saw somebody doing that, and then they get, there's a 19,
Say, hey,
and then they come into us for an adjoining section, or a section that's away, but it's like, hold it, this is the same thing.
staff is going to say, no, you're cumulatively bringing more than 20 lots.
All right. Does everybody understand what I'm
Yes.
bringing up
Yes.
here? I just don't want somebody to be able to dance around the ordinance.
But yes, you're
So
exactly
for the
right.
secondary plat, we would have the power to say, not
No,
so
no,
fast.
no. Staff would just say, they would kick it to saying,
It's a major, it's
you're
not a minor.
major. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
then it would come to us.
Then it would
I
come to you
mean,
guys.
and do we, I guess, or should we, in the minor, well, I guess does the UDO administrator in all cases have the option to kick that to us if they want? Say it is 18 or 19 lots, but for some reason, staff feels like, well, maybe we should have planning board take it.
They wouldn't. But remember, TRC is still involved, even in the minor
Right.
stage, and presumably a planning board member is being made aware of that. But no, because if I'm an applicant,
You want to know that a minor is going to be staff level only.
that's correct.
Because it's different.
They could voluntarily, I suppose, staff UDO administrator, hey, this is going to be controversial. Would you mind it being approved by the planning board? And they could say yes, but staff could not say, I'm mandating that you approve this at the planning board stage. Does that make
Because
sense?
obviously with a minor, there's no public participation at all.
Well, it's not supposed to be
Right.
public participation in the
I know,
major
I
one
mean,
either, because it's an administrative decision. Technically, public opinion means this much in that approval. What matters is the ordinance terms.
Moving ahead to F in 2.14, we have minor and major subdivision final plats. Is it the case that we've decided here that final plats really don't need to come before the planning board?
That was our discussion, but and that's what's been
That's
offered
what's here.
Yes, sir. That was the discussion. That you've seen the preliminary is really what outlines the impacts, the infrastructure, all that. Final is just, I guess, tying a bow on it, if you will. It's a done deal. Everything's gone in.
Does anybody have any problems with that? I think it was unanimous that we agreed that all as that was another step, and that town staff needed to do we needed to allow them to do their job.
Well, because there isn't any, if the final conforms, there's nothing we're going to do anyway other than vote on it.
Or
right?
can do.
Or correct. So,
Right. Yeah.
Moving up to, okay, we were at F, minor and major subdivision final plats. Going to number 8 within that section, B is in Bravo. In the 8 is titled, 8 is the wording of it is minor and major subdivision final plat review procedure. We know that the UDO administrator is going to be reviewing it, final plat. But then it seems to say in the second line in B, 8B, the UDO administrator and the technical review committee, if applicable, shall review the plat. Is it the case the TRC is brought in to look at a final plat when they've already looked at the preliminary plat?
TRC is actually very important for a final plat because we want Dustin and Public Services to come in and say that infrastructure has been installed appropriately so that we can sign off on letting those folks go record it. That's our last chance. If it
Okay.
gets recorded and it's that the streets aren't correct or whatever, we've got basically no recourse.
All right. So the TRC does come in multiple phases of a major.
Yes, sir.
So why is the if applicable is there?
and-
Should that be just strike?
If it's a minor final plat, it may be that there's no infrastructure in. It may not be a case where you need the public services department. If you can imagine if
So
it's,
that's an as applicable.
if applicable, or
As because that's deciding which group of the technical review committee.
sure, we can change it to as applicable.
That appears in several other locations. That
Because what you're saying is,
Applicable.
say there's nothing to do with storm or whatever, you don't bring that person in.
Well,
But
you-
if there's something to do with roads, you bring Dustin in. If there's something to do,
But
so that you're
but remember-
using, instead of using the whole TRC, you're using portions where
the TRC is already established that way. The UDO administrator determines the makeup of the TRC depending on the application. The if applicable refers to if you even need to initiate that process, and that's why it says if applicable. Because there may be instances that it's not necessary.
I like as, but that's
Okay,
beside the point.
we can do as,
Ronnie, you satisfied with that word change?
and
Yes,
I'll
sir.
need
What
to
about the
go.
rest of the board?
I need
Great.
I'll need to go through and
There's other
there's other
statements when it
yes,
talks about the TRC. It always says if applicable.
if applicable. Yeah.
Boy, I would have loved to have had a ability to word search, find through this new document you gave us. Boy, I would have
find and change.
I would have drank a lot less wine going through this.
Oh yeah.
No,
Okay.
you wouldn't.
I mean, we just need to talk to administrator about. About electronic copies of this and versioning. and
Well,
so
we had
forth.
already decided that we were not going to make copies available that could, in fact, create, because people would then think, oh, this is now law, and when it ain't yet. It's
So I feel for you, Pete.
I'll bet.
Mhm. He doesn't want you to change his language. That's all it is.
I'm fine to change the language, but we got a long way to go.
Are we technically at our 2-hour limit? I don't know. What do we say we started at?
Well, hold it. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
I looked at it
Did we start at-
kind of and then got distracted. We have made the policy that after 2 hours of working on this, we would take a vote, which would need to be unanimous to extend it, and we would extend it. In the past, we've been extending it for a certain amount of time. We're not going to finish with, well, I don't want to preclude that we're not going to finish.
Because we're done through 2.14, right?
Yes,
So the next one would be 2.15 would be next. Correct?
yes.
Correct.
Conference. I don't know. Mr. Chair, if I may, and I may need to have the administrator here weigh in on this. Certainly, if you guys decided to stop here at this point, I think it would be possible to do September 1, depending on everyone's availability. I just noticed this morning it's the North Carolina Planning Conference that week of the 15th. I'm not sure if Chad will even be here. I technically probably need to be there to get the credits that I need to maintain my credentials. And given that,
as well.
pardon?
And him as well.
And yeah, and him as well. So I don't know that is the room still available if we did meet on the 1st?
Mm-hmm.
My only issue is I I need to move the time to a little later time that morning. I'd have to meet at 10:30 that morning. But don't let me weigh on your. So I just wanted to mention that so that you guys knew that maybe we need to meet if we meet on the 1st.
You said you had another meeting following this in another town. What would your ability be to go another half an hour, or would it be best to close it at
We
this
can go.
juncture?
We can go another half an hour here
Yeah.
today.
Well,
I don't think we'll finish though.
Well,
What-
let's do that and
what-
see how much we can get done.
Okay.
Well, we're at a pretty logical spot right now
I,
in a major section. That's
Exactly.
might require some time
10:30 on the first work session.
Okay. Okay.
when we surely could complete it on the first. Whatever.
30 minutes is fine for me, Mr. Chair. I just
all
wanted
right,
to point
let's-
that out on the
Let's-
first.
I'd like somebody to make a motion that we continue until 11:30.
I so move.
Can we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, we'll proceed. And then at the end of the meeting, Ms. Anglin, I think we have to make a motion for the next meeting
Mhm.
to make it back on the first now. Okay,
We'll just change the time.
and the time, yes. We're on 2.15. Everybody agree?
Yep.
Um,
Oh,
UDO
boy.
text and zoning map amendment. I was excited about looking at down zoning. It was a term that I was really not as familiar with as I should have been, but now I am. And I came to the section about the planning board and having, this is under A4B, which talked about planning board may have a public hearing, but that's already been answered, and we talked about it in another section, so I'm backing off of that. I'm turning pages. Planning board action and town council action, I had no comments. That seems to all be, for the most part, existing language.
Yeah.
There are a few starter phrases in each of those sections. But I had nothing in there.
So this is language that was pulled from other sections and inserted into.
Yes.
Okay.
And I was able to find it where it was.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't look word for word to make sure it hadn't been changed, but I have to respect the highlighting and underlining as being accurate.
Mr. Chair, I don't have enough time to do.
The conditional zoning, does the planning board feel that we've discussed conditional zoning enough? It's not something that is very frequent.
But we don't have it now, right?
Yep.
So this is new. We decided to add it,
This
Which
would
I'm-
be new.
which is good, I think. I just have a couple questions, I guess.
Please.
And in conditional zoning 2.16B, I'll do 2 first.
Mhm.
In 2, it says applications and proposal for conditional zoning approval shall only be considered within the BB1 zoning district on the island. So I looked at my map here, and there's BB1 being pink, I guess, mauve. I don't know. So it looks like mostly along the road coming in,
Sunset Boulevard.
and there's a number of individual parcels there, etc. Correct?
Yes, sir.
And then you read further down, it says within mainland residential zoning districts, a minimum of 25 acre continuous tract is required for any conditional zoning requests. So, and I could be reading this wrong, but the way I read it is, in BB1 on the island, any single tract can be made conditional zoning.
Yep.
But if you're on the mainland, you need a 25 acre continuous tract. Why is that there?
That's a great question, and I'm glad you're pointing it out. I think we made very brief mention of this when we talked about conditional zoning months ago. So I'll address first the island for BB1. I think that unless I'm mistaken, the position of the planning board is that you'd be supportive of creative proposals within the business district on the island portion for, you know, to help encourage business, et cetera, reuse of those tracks, correct? I don't think that you would be in support of conditional zoning request on every little single parcel on the island. That would be a variance or something else. I don't think.
There's other avenues for those. Yeah.
Yes. Now, on the mainland, conditional zoning presumably is going to be likely for either a non-residential project in a commercial district, or if it's going to be residential, it's going to be tied to a subdivision. And because of that, we want to set a minimum threshold of acreage for which somebody can come forward to you all. That 25 acres also aligns with the multi-phase development statute that has a certain vesting period under law, and that's a threshold that that is present in multiple.
So that 25 acre doesn't apply to any B zoning districts on the mainland.
That's correct, and we can make
Any
that
what?
clear.
Any Bs
That's right.
or Hs. It's just the Rs.
It's well, MH would be a residential.
Well,
Because
this is where I'm starting to get confused.
sure,
So that 25 acre, maybe we should spell out the districts.
we can
then.
we can do that.
It
Absolutely.
should apply, well, I would think it would apply to MR3 in the Jaguars Lair area.
That's
Yeah,
correct.
because that's residential. Well, it's in the name, but maybe just like we did above, within mainland residential zoning districts, and then go,
We can list them.
MR1, MR2, MR2A, MR3, whatever it is.
Mhm.
Okay. But now if you're not in those,
There's no.
if
minimum.
you're an MB1, MB2, you're not required, you can be an individual parcel of any size can do conditional zoning.
That's correct.
Do we need to spell that out here?
We
Or-
can. I mean, the other position
What-
is that you guys don't have that section in 2 is optional. If you guys want to let folks apply for anything, you can do that too, knowing that you guys are going to be the ones with the discretion, and ultimately the council is going to approve or deny somebody's application.
Well, it seems reasonable to have some limits, I guess. I understand the point on the island, it was to encourage, even though you get, I don't know, what is there, 20, 30
It's
small
not much.
parcels.
Yep.
To kind of open up a new avenue of thinking for them.
Yep.
Well,
But
it's
then
First
what-
and 27th Street.
Hmm?
It's First and 27th Street also,
That's
are in the BB1.
Yep.
Yeah.
Not only the Sunset Boulevard South.
Yeah.
So it's more than 30
Right.
parcels.
Well, so I guess to clarify what zones, maybe it'd be a good
Sure.
idea that cover for,
We can-
and I guess, how did we come up with the 25 number? I don't recall. I couldn't find in my notes where it was. I could have just missed the note.
it aligns with that statutory what's determined to be a multi-phased development plan, and that's a 25 acre minimum, and they're afforded certain rights when they have an approved project, and it's a clean cutoff, and that 25 acre threshold is used in a lot of different jurisdictions.
Didn't we also have a 40-acre threshold on something? I thought
It might have been PRDs or PUDs.
Yeah, well, it could have been.
Yeah.
It could have been. It could have been. When the mud district was established here,
There was a
line
40
all the way
acre.
down.
Yeah,
Wasn't that a?
I think it's a 40 or 50 acre.
And I guess you feel then, and I think you're right, that it's clear for anything not covered by those specific 25 acre limitation is open for
We
this.
We can
In
clarify.
other words, that if you're an MB1 or MB2, you're not restricted,
correct.
because it would seem like a good way to get some new ideas for certain spots.
Now, is this if this conditional zoning, and Jaguars Lair is a good example, You know, if they wanted to use, can they use this process to create mixed-use development?
They, unless you stipulated that they can't modify the underlying use of the base
Well, I
zone,
want them to be able to do it.
you want them to be able to do it. Okay,
Yeah.
yes, and then they could. Basically, you're approving a new zoning district when you do that.
But it's not something that is a right. It
That-
it
that's
has
right.
to be approved.
That's right.
Right.
Public input meeting
Yeah.
comes to you guys, and then it ultimately comes to the council.
Okay.
So there's 3 stages that they
And there's guardrails on all of that too. They got to be specific.
Yeah.
and the town council is under no right to approve any of those, similar to, which is opposite of a special use permit. If someone meets their burden, you got to approve it. That's
There's no such burden for a conditional zoning.
right. It's a legislative decision.
Okay.
Now, you may be pressured because, say, you approved a similar project down the street, and so you may feel some pressure there, but you're not setting any precedent whatsoever.
Right.
It's just it's just like
Well,
a special use.
yeah.
Unfortunately, I wasn't able to participate in the meeting where we approved the mixed-use development for Sea Trail, which I would have voted for. But one of the issues that concerned me was that based on that 54-hole golf special regulation, nobody else could do it. So I would be, if this opens that up for
This would not, unless unless their base zoning was so if it's a small tract, say they owned a 1 acre MR3 tract,
yeah,
you
no.
could not do that. But if they
This does not expand the right of,
Yep.
of anybody from what we had before. Anyway,
no, it just offers the opportunity. It's additional tool in
Yeah.
the town's tool belt.
that the town can consider along with the developer to make some changes or
Correct.
authorize some uses.
Yes.
But nobody's required to do anything, basically.
No.
Okay.
Just gives another procedure.
And my second question was on same section B1, the last sentence, development standards include such things as parking, landscaping, design guidelines, and buffers. And I guess if that's there, one of my items, of course, should roads be in there and sidewalks be in there in that list, or is that list really not needed because all development standards should be followed? I could go either way on that. Either once we start listing things, do we need to list, like roads is always on my list, and maybe sidewalks should be on there too, or it's better say development standards. I don't know. All other development standards must apply, or something more general, as opposed to starting with a list and then, if in my mind, I jumped out the things that I didn't see on the list, which was like roads and sidewalks. Would it be better to be more general in that, saying that all infrastructure or something must follow the development guidelines, or I don't know.
So, so someone could come forward with, and I have another thing that I wanted to point out about conditional zoning that I'll try not to forget before we're done talking about this. But someone could come forward and say they're required to have 20 parking spaces based on their use, but they may have a site that is too small to afford it, or whatever it may be, and rather than the 20 parking spaces, they may say, actually, can you approve me for a conditionally zoned site that only has 10 parking spaces, but because I'm only going to do 10 parking spaces, I'm going to increase my buffer standards above the minimum, or whatever it may be. So you guys, as part of that proposal, can choose, no, actually, I think you need to meet the minimum 20 parking spaces, or yes, that makes sense given your site constraints and the fact that you're willing to do X, Y, Z to allow those. This is just calling out that the development standards need to be addressed as part of the approval. So the UDO administrator will have a statement in their report for this that says all development standards are typical and are going to be followed, or the applicant has requested that their parking be 10 spots instead of the
Right.
required 20.
So again, get rid of the list and just say all development standards apply. I mean, why did you pick, I guess maybe the question, why did you pick these 4?
Just as an example, just calling out what those things would be. The UDO administrator would understand.
So
what
it should
those
be
were.
standards include but not limited to such things as parking, landscaping, design, and buffer.
Yep.
Isn't this really saying that development standards are up for consideration
Yes.
along with this conditional zoning request?
Yep.
So maybe we should just include an but not limited to in that sentence. I just kind of infers to me when I read it that
And
these is what should be included, but what you're saying is these are just examples.
Mhm.
They're not limited to those examples.
And that's correct.
Okay,
and
I got
the
it.
other thing is, I mean, you guys can also specify that that they must meet all the minimum development standards.
Or we
period.
can take it as a special case and allow the 10 parking spots.
You can't. But if you say all development standards shall be followed, then
No, you
then-
couldn't.
then
That
you
doesn't
couldn't.
say that, though.
It
It
does
talks
not say
about a
it.
review of the development standards
That's right.
are included in this package.
That's right.
So that's the way I read it.
Yes.
Yeah, well, I was reading it to only these.
No, I know. And I don't disagree with
Right, that's-
you
Yeah.
expanding
So
that.
is it only, is it, so it's all, or?
Can you add et cetera?
Yeah. Development standards may include, but not limited to
Right,
that. Yep.
right. So if someone instead wants to trade parking for buffers, which was your example, maybe they want to trade parking for open space or something.
A through street.
A through street or something, right?
Yep.
Thank you.
The second thing I did want to point out about this, in some places, and Calabash has moved in this direction now, in their use table for certain use, and I apologize if we spoke about this. They will identify where there were formerly special uses. They've changed it in their table to a CZ. So it requires, for example, a conditional zoning request rather than a special use permit. So now, for example, in Calabash, if someone wants to do a multifamily or certain types of uses in their central business district there, they have to go through the conditional zoning process.
And who officiates that process?
It's the same as this one. So
Well,
Who
decides?
officiates it in Calabash is my,
who decides what uses are subject to that?
yes.
We worked with the Board of Commissioners to finalize the uses that they felt comfortable.
So it's town council.
Yes.
Okay.
But
Does it go through the planning board?
yes, it would follow this same process if we identified uses in your
So
in your
if
table.
things that were previously special use permit, which means it's going to the Board of Adjustment, if you change the SS, if we create a new category called
CZ.
CZ, it wouldn't go to the Board of Adjustment, it goes to the Planning Board.
It goes to they're required to do a public input meeting, go to the planning board, and then to the town
That's the
council.
difference, I think. I'm reading that would be the difference.
That's the difference, yes.
And our table doesn't have that now. We don't have that provision. So we
It's
would need to
something
discuss
you
that.
could consider.
We could consider when we get to review of section 6, the table,
Yeah.
some things that we may have as SS now, we could create a new category called CZ. Would be
And-
something
and-
that we consider when we get there.
Yes, and just within
Okay.
reason,
I'm
because it's a
open for.
fairly arduous
discussion.
process, obviously. Okay.
All right, moving ahead.
So just,
I,
just one. So this conditional zoning is really like a slight step below special use permit.
I don't.
It's another route.
no.
It's another route.
Okay.
It's an
It's an alternative route. Okay. so,
legislative
pejorative.
process that the public is involved versus
Okay.
quasi judicial, where a very limited amount of folks have rights
Okay,
to.
got it.
to
And, and that's the downside of the Board of Adjustment. It isn't open up, I mean, it's a public meeting, but it isn't open up for input as much as a planning board public hearing would be.
Yes.
All right, we're on conditional zoning, 2.16. I had no more comments in that section. And rather than get,
And again, it's all been, Chad is okay with as written. Any other?
He would be happy for you guys to have this as an option.
that would get us up to vested rights, and I might submit that, because I do have some questions that follow through, particularly on the review processes on 22 and 23, as well as 21, that we consider adjourning at this point. Any comments from the rest of the planning board about drawing the line here at 2.20, which is a reserve section, and having that be at our next special meeting?
I so move.
Would second?
I second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. Let the record indicate that we finished up to the new formatted up to 2.20, and we will proceed on 2.21 vested rights at our next special meeting.
And that
Well,
we're,
are we going to just,
Well, I'm not over yet, but
Okay.
yes. We had made an amendment to the agenda, and we had added under new business 2 to cancel our September 1st regular meeting. I would like to have discussion and availability comments from planning board members and others regarding adding the September 1st meeting back into the schedule, but we'll call it a special meeting as opposed to a regular meeting. And that we start that meeting at 10:30 a.m. here in council chambers.
10:30 or 11:30.
10:30.
10:30.
Thank you.
But
Yes, we do need to cancel the 15th. Sorry.
okay, that's right. Ms. Anglin, do you have any issues with us calling it a special meeting, so it's not confusing the public that it is a regular planning board meeting? And that we would also cancel
thank you.
the special meeting that was scheduled for September 15th.
yeah, well, that's,
Cancel the 9/15/22
Should-
meeting.
we don't know if there'll be, we don't know of anything else. Because we're not having a regular meeting, should we not cancel the 15th? We know we don't have anything else. Can we make the 15th a regular meeting should the need arise?
The
know what I'm
director
saying?
may not be
If we
here.
cancel it now, as opposed to waiting to the 1st to cancel it, if something should come up in the interim, could we use the 15th as the regular meeting then? If we don't cancel it now, but if we still have nothing, cancel it on the 1st?
You could.
But we always have the ability to call because it wouldn't be a special meeting, it would be a regular planning board meeting.
And Mr. Chair, if I may, I believe all of the directors'
Oh, they're all, everybody's
dead-
gonna be gone. right?
deadlines are tied to the first meeting, meaning that
Okay,
an applicant would have to come in to
so
meet.
that we're not forced into having the timeline of that meeting anyway as a regular meeting.
Correct.
The next regular meeting would be the first one in October that applicants would be preparing for.
That's correct.
All right, does that make sense to the rest of the board?
Yes.
I mean, I would say let's have another special meeting on the 15th, but we can't because
can't.
of your availability and Chad's availability.
And we can't even have a regular meeting because Chad won't be here, right?
All right, with that motion, I'd like to hear it about canceling the,
I so move.
do we have a second?
So we're canceling the second meeting.
We're reconvening the meeting on the 1st, and we're calling it a special meeting
Got
for
it.
the UDO. And we're canceling the meeting on the 15th of September.
I second.
All in discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, the next item will be public comments, and not seeing any public, we will, I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned. Wes, thank you very
Thanks,
much.
Wes.
And now we have more homework, huh?
Yes, sir.